I think your analysis was very straight line. History doesn't run in a straight line.
Kid, you cannot tell your neighbor he is stealing ducks when you are stealing funds.
As High Commissioner, I was wrong. As Charandas Prasad, I reacted naturally how any person would have.
I did not come here for that kind of abuse. I did not come here for that kind of abuse. If you're going to go down that road, I'll walk off.
But it's all okay once they're talking. If they were talking, I could not have been here today.
You got ADHD.
I got that.
Calm down.
I think I've done enough in terms of taking our team out of trouble from losing.
Come on, Lou Taylor. You got script. I'm reading the script now, and the first person that comes to my mind to play a detective,
Yes,
but
okay,
an
he's critic.
erratic
Mikhail
detective
Rodriguez.
is Mikhail Rodriguez.
Why an African slap an Indian? Why a man and slap a woman? Look, girl, how you deal with that? You deal with that.
We must encourage platforms like this because it brings together different people and allows for discussions to take place in our country on a multiplicity of fundamental issues.
Kingdom, you apologizing for something you think I did is wrong. I don't want you to do that, and you should not have done that. Hi there. Pleasant Wednesday evening to you. On behalf of Leonard Craig, sitting next to me, my co-host, thanks for being with us. Good night, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. This is the Freddie Kissoon Show. Once again, on behalf of Leonard Craig, a pleasant evening to you. This evening, we don't have a guest. We are continuing our new format, which was proposed by Leonard Craig, that based on his responses, which I fully endorse, that people would like to hear the two co-hosts analyze social phenomena, political phenomena in Guyana. People would like to hear our take. As we said before, when we're interviewing people, we can ask the questions, but the 1 hour belongs to the guest. So this evening, we will look at a number of topics, and we start with our take that the PPP will win the next elections. What Leonard and I will discuss, exchanging our opinion, is what would be the margin. So on that score, I will bring in Leonard Craig.
Hi, viewers. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. Please, you can find us under the Guyanese Critic page, and we have also a specific page for the Freddie Kissoon Show
on Facebook.
So please join us. We're on the regular spot on YouTube. So continue to join us and continue to interact. Freddie Kissoon, like myself and many others, based on analysis, we are convinced that the PPP will win in 2025. But people have different permutations as to what will be the final margin of victory. Now, if nothing else, the last 4 or 5 general elections should instruct us that even when parties are on a high, the margin of victory has not been large. At least for the last 3 general elections. Because Guyana does not have a strong migrant voting, Guyanese do not have strong migrant voting habits. From time to time, people do experiment with new parties, but between the age-old juggernauts, between PNC and PPP, there is usually not any major movements between the two. And so to expect a huge sweeping victory is not one that I would expect. And so if there's anybody, especially those in the PPP, who expect a victory, you have your feet on the accelerator, don't relax and don't come down from 100 to 80 just because you believe this victory is almost assured based on trends, that is. You have to continue. And I figured those in the opposition may have a similar feeling. And I think even those in the opposition should know that the PPP is in the ascension, and they have to come from a far way back, and they have a lot to do if they're ever to contemplate that they can win.
You said the PPP just now. You mean the PNC?
Yeah, the opposition. Right. Sorry, they have a long way to come from if they even want to contemplate winning. But nevertheless, I think sufficient voter shift, and I see some voter shift, or there's expectation of a voter shift from the opposition to the PPP. But again, if anybody thinks that this is going to be a large, massive shift, I am not so convinced that it will be a large, massive shift. However, as I always communicate to people about the AFC, when I was a member of the AFC does not, or at that time, did not have one large voting bloc anywhere in the country. But among the PPP supporters, among PNC supporters, among East Indians, among blacks, among Amerindians, there is always a little chunk. And Kemraj Ramjitan used to refer to it as flaking off. The little flakes here, there add up to something meaningful in terms of seats. And that is what I see happening from the opposition towards the PPP. There are little flakes that are falling off, little parts of the bark of a tree just falling off. And when they are gathered, they can hurt the opposition and they can be meaningful to the results. But any mass shift, you would be deluding yourself to believe that that will happen. There may be people in the PPP who are convinced that that will happen. I am not so convinced, but I am convinced that there will be a victory. I'm convinced that there will be some flaking off. And again, that will be sufficient enough to hurt the opposition. One last thing before Freddie comes in. The more mobile part of opposition supporters are those who had a greater propensity to support the AFC. We know in Guyana there's largely people largely vote by race. However, the Afro-Guyanese who supported the AFC were not necessarily PNC sympathizers, many of them. I was in the AFC, and I can communicate that to you loud and clear. And anybody in the AFC who says otherwise would be deluding themselves. There was a large Afro support of the AFC that were not necessarily PNC sympathizers. Those people are very, very voter mobile, if we can use that term. They can migrate and look for a political home somewhere else. Several of them may very well end up back with the opposition. Several of them may gravitate more towards the PNC than the AFC. And of course, a significant portion of that will also gravitate towards the PPP. And I believe that is where the greatest proportion of the flaking off will take place. That is my general analysis of what is likely to happen.
Okay, here's my take on the margin of victory for the PPP. And I don't have a definitive margin, but let me introduce the preface before I go on. I think the PPP is going to win the elections. There's no question in my mind, for 3 reasons. One, I think it has all money, and traditional political theory is about fight for the spoil. That is what brings about revolution. That society is genetically class divided. And in mostly capitalist societies, because of the nature of capitalism, the working classes are always at a disadvantage. And so you have this perennial fight for the pie. That has been substantially reduced. You're talking about a Guyanese in his early 70s who have lived in Guyana all the time except for studies abroad in a short stint with the Grenada government. So I know how we were fighting for the pie. I was part, my whole life I was part of that, fighting for part of the pie. But I think this thing, after the surge of sugar prices in the early 70s, we've never had such a windfall of guaranteed income. And you have to be twisted to think that all this money that the ruling party got as part of the government, they just took it and said, we're going to use it for East Indian people only, we're going to use it for ourselves. No, I think they don't need to do that because it's so much. And why would you just hog it and just put it into one sector only? So the use of all money, I think, has brought about some substantial changes in the way people see their government. That is one. Secondly, and some of the strong die-in-the-wool supporters of Chedi Jagan may not agree with me, but I believe from the time of independence to now, often Ali has emerged as a kind of mysterious, attractive, magnetic figure that cannot be really put in a compartment. And I think he has gone beyond Jagan and Burnham in terms of two things. Showing that he can listen to you. The second thing, so not yet. In this, so the power of the art wasn't as enough. So though the PPP, right, the reason is We have moved away from the society where propaganda can so easily sway people. I have to research the reason for that, but I would probably give two reasons. Changing demographics, that more than a majority of the population and belong to that era where they soaked up this propaganda. The young people are so distracted by social media, by all kinds of things. So you can't really get them to sit down and force doctrines on them. And so it's not going to be easy to count on votes from such propagandistic saturation. Those are the three reasons why I think the PPP will win. And I think that victory is definitive. It has to be something very, very tsunamic in terms of disaster for the PPP to lose the election. I mean, you look around the society, and unless there is a huge earthquake or the Atlantic sink Guyana and there's no election, I don't see how the PPP can lose. The question is the margin. And here I will disagree with Leonard in one dimension. I don't think since the history of electoral politics and in the history of the PNC, the electoral environment has been so drab and so boring for the opposition, but particularly the PNC. There was one low moment for the PNC, and Robert Corbin stood very tall. I want to say, as a trained historian, we must not be flippant to Robert Corbin's role in contemporary Guyanese history. I have made it quite clear. A street should be named after Desmond Hoyt. Something maybe bigger should be named after Desmond Hoyt, because when you examine Guyana at a certain trajectory, Desmond Hoyt made a significant contribution. And when the PNC was facing dormancy, Robert Corbin stood tall. Robert Corbin was seen by the mulatto Creole class as somebody that should never have been the PNC leader. And they withdrew physically and they withdrew finance. And he was really, and the PNC were really in the doldrums. And he resurrected the PNC by coming together with the WP at that time, Clive Thomas, and Rupert Wright were advising him. And so APNU was born. And the 5 seats that Corbin lost in 2006, he got back in 2011. I do not believe that in the history of the PNC, its ebb has ever been so problematic and ever been so hair-raising. The hemorrhage of the PNC, the hemorrhaging of the PNC, the disarray, the shambolic directions have never, I'm going to use the word never a third time, never have been so great. And I think the PNC has reached the stage where, unless something happens before the October election or the November election, the PNC is going to lose a number of seats. How much, whether it's 5 from the last time or more, I don't know. I am not willing to put a definitive figure on that. But I cannot see the AFC saving the PNC by now having a coalition and a new person being the consensus candidate. Maybe it needs some other force to come and cement itself with the PNC, but not the AFC. You're talking about dead wood. You're talking about dead meat. Going to save the PNC. Human society cannot be judged scientifically. Science is a different thing. But how is that possible for the AFC to save the PNC when the AFC will get more seats and has more going for it in the 83,000 square miles of Guyana than the AFC? So if the PNC is going to be saved, it cannot be a coalition with the AFC. I honestly think that the AFC, even if it gets 1 seat, it will get enough on its own. But on its own, it's showing it's going to be disastrous. So within that paradigm, I believe the PPP is going to benefit significantly from what Leonard called flake off. I think it's not going to be flakes. It's going to be a little bit bigger than snowflakes. It's going to be huge little boulders, but not boulders. It's going to be huge pieces falling off. I am not sure how much it's going to be. If the state of affairs continue, it's quite likely to be in the area of gain for the PPP of 3, 4, 5, 6. I would say between the range of 3 and 6. I cannot see something coming to save the PNC so great that they wouldn't lose 3, 4, 5 seats. They're in a very bad shape. And no one has said it more openly than the AFC, who wants to partner them. The AFC is saying anybody but Norton. Say, Nigel, you say me. I am going. If you don't want me, get somebody else, but not Norton. Then AFC say, all right, we got Terence Campbell. So the AFC, not Craig, not the PPP, not me, is more, the AFC is more consistent in saying Norton is unelectable. The people are saying, bring somebody else. Bring somebody else. They up, Nigel, you said they got people out there to fill the void of Norton stepping down. So unless something happens, I think the PPP is going to win. They're going to increase their parliamentary seats. I am not sure if it's going to be over 5 or 6. I think this striking landslide, I am not prepared to go that far yet.
Right. Two things I'd like to pick up there. One, you mentioned that the AFC cannot save the PNC. In a sense, it can, and let me explain. I believe that the AFC is contesting in the same pool as the PNC, and many PNC supporters, some of them who even
I know where you're coming from.
Some of them who even wish to punish Norton based on the factions that occur.
Once AFC is there, they're going to vote.
Once AFC is there, they probably will vote for the coalition, and if AFC separate, they probably will vote for AFC. So, if the AFC is with the PNC, then they would have only a partial embarrassment. But if they are separate, it would be total humiliation for Norton, because those Amna Ali supporters, those other prominent faces that are missing, those people who are sympathetic to some of the people who were pushed aside or or who stepped aside, are going to find in that pool who are not part of those who were flaked off or who have decided to vote for the PPP instead. I'm talking about those who remain in the pool. They can very well see Nigel Hughes as an attractive presidential candidate, and they can vote for Nigel in preference to Norton. And when the AFC
is saying... Nigel believes that.
Yeah, well, that's what I was about to say. When do you hear the AFC is saying that? I don't believe it is wild. It is somewhat backed by reality. As to whether the reality matches exactly as Nigel Hughes is portraying it, I am not sure. But when you walk the streets, you and I walk the streets, and people talk. Every day people talk without you even prompting them, right? And you hear supporters of the opposition talking about how ineffective Norton is and all of that. Look, when the PNC was contesting for leader, Harmon was running against Norton.
And Basil Williams.
Right. Well, I'm talking about those who had a real chance.
Don't Williams here, man has a large ego.
And I said to my wife and many other people who I chat with, I was saying, Harmon is best suited for this position. And I was saying to them, Norton is better placed because there was a mystery surrounding Norton, that he's a strong man, he's an organizer, he can put people in the streets, he is this, he is that. And that mystery that surrounded Norton needed to remain intact. And Norton should have been, as he has started to be, a powerful sidekick to Harmon, because when Harmon was leader of the opposition, Norton had an office in the opposition leader's office. He had a place there, and I think he had a title and things like that. But when the election came up, obviously Norton stepped out, and you can't fault people for having an ambition. But I think Norton did not understand what he was getting into, and he did not understand the gravity of and he also did not understand the quantum of people inside of the PNC who did not like him as a leader. I think Norton didn't quite understand. But because he is more of a popular person, he was literally guaranteed a win at the election, because more grassroots PNC organizing sympathizers are on Norton's side. And you cannot, most parties, inside of most parties, you cannot beat the organizing class. And the organizing class are not the class that supported Harmon. So Harmon did not have sufficient quote-unquote boots on the ground to organize people sufficient to win. Those who supported Norton were more of that class. And so Norton was bound to win. But he was not and never was the best candidate. And so when he became leader, that aura, that mystery,
evaporated.
Yeah, was removed. And then people saw Aubrey in his naked incompetence. And when you observe that now, people become dejected, people stop supporting Norton, people don't, and that was the thing. When Irfan Ali first assumed presidential candidate of the PPP, Irfan Ali had some of that Norton, he was receiving some of this similar backlash that Norton is receiving. But having become the president, I think Irfan Ali didn't mind being self-deprecating. He didn't mind being vulnerable in front of people. And he grew quite rapidly before our very eyes, right? He started out a bit awkward and so on. And part of his learning curve is that he didn't mind coming over as awkward, but he was learning and learning and learning in the process. And I think you mentioned 3 items as to why the PPP would win, and then you mentioned 2 things about why you think Irfan is doing better than both Burnham and Jagan in those 2 narrow areas. And one of those things is that both Burnham and Jagan had a facade to maintain. Burnham had to maintain a facade as a middle class, well-spoken type of person. When Irfan Ali came to the presidency, he did not have that facade that he has to maintain between himself and the population and all of that. And so you saw Irfan in his raw awkwardness, and you felt like he is one of us. I am awkward too, and this man is not afraid to be awkward in my presence. And I see him improving. I see him being more presidential. I see him, for example, just last week, Irfan Ali appeared alongside Marco Rubio in a press situation, and he acquitted himself well. He made a good representation, and that speaks to the constant growth of Irfan Ali in front of her. And when you see somebody grow like that, it's like a parent extending that kind of feeling, that kind of affection towards a child, because you bring up, you see the person grow, and I think that is what the population is feeling for Irfan, and that is helping the PPP, in my opinion. Whereas on the other side, when you observe Aubrey Norton from the moment he took leadership to now, you have not seen any growth. You have not seen any new direction. You have not seen any new policy. You have not seen you have not seen any attempt at being novel, and that is also on the opposite side, that is causing the attrition inside of the PNC.
Well, there are two things there are two strands in your just concluded delivery I'd like to take up, and you will respond. You said you have this theory that there are people that won't vote for the PNC, but they will say, all right, I can vote for they come together. Say now that the AFC is with the PNC, they vote. But
providing Nigel,
is it Nigel or is it the AFC? That's number one. Number two is Sherrod Duncan, who is as far away from being anywhere close to any government circle. I've said that the AFC had done a poll, and it shows Nigel is not commanding eligibility or commanding preference to run as the consensus candidate. He said in his Facebook, which today was Wednesday, it's in the Guyana Chronicle Wednesday, quoted him as saying, the AFC knows that what the AFC poll has shown about Nigel. So how does one account for that? Now, I don't know the scientific basis of the poll. Duncan didn't. Anybody could. I guess they probably went out and polled AFC supporters, or they just did a poll generally and asking people what you think about Nigel. The second thing I want to take up with you is the juxtaposition of Harmon and Norton in the contest for leadership, in which you said Norton had boots on the ground, that organizing class. Mm-hmm. I think Harmon should not have contested because there was a deflated PNC. They had just lost the elections. Less than the people didn't want to hear about the man who was the face of the government, despite Granger being the president. Everybody knew Harmon called the shot. He was the minister in charge of the presidency. And plus, because of his closeness to Granger, he was even more than what Luncheon was with Jagan and Jagdew. Luncheon was very, very influential, but more so. And to lose this election and use it so ignominiously, I don't know why Williams and Harmon wanted to contest. Somebody should have contested that was not part of that election failure.
Which was Norton.
And Norton had no high position.
Mm-hmm.
No high position. So, in fact, just before the government lost about a year ago, Norton was seen as being sidelined, put in an office in Ministry of Citizenship. So, Harman probably believed, because of his past status, hey, I was like de facto president, how could someone like that lost? But I think the Harman people, the Granger people, the Basil Williams people were just turned off. So they weren't interested in the candidacy of those people. The people who were interested in voting were very much alive to the issue, and that was Norton's people, the grassroots people, the what you call the people in the trenches. But you need to know, and I think this slipped you, when the voting, the total registered voters, as against what he got, he fell short of the 50%. And
Norton.
Yeah, Norton.
Yeah, that is indicative of people not supporting Norton, but Norton won. I don't think Norton won because of universal support in the PNC. I think he won because his greatest supporters are the organizing class of the party. And when you're the organizing class, when you're the organizing class, you get to put exactly who must go on the nominating committee. You get to put who must become delegates and all of that, because you're the organizing class. And from that level, the whole election apparatus could have been controlled, right? And I believe that is why Norton won. But while you were ready to dismiss Harman should not have been dismissible. And here's why. You're quite right that Harman was the face of the government and all of that. If the PNC had sense and strategy, Harman would remain the leader, but Norton becomes the face, because at that time Norton had an aura, a mystique
would not have
about
accepted
him.
that. You know Norton.
But that is what would have made Norton super popular.
Because
then Norton gets to work out of the shadows, and everybody says Norton is the man. Harman is not effective.
I don't know how well you know them, but because of my longevity in politics, I would say of the PNC, WPA, PPP, the whole gamut, all of the third parties, the people I find who express their ego in such a way make you want to say to them, man, you're too big in this ego thing, actually came from the PNC, Norton and Basil Williams. I've never met in any third party beginning from the 70s. I've seen real elitist, middle class snobs in the WPA. But this ego thing, you have to look hard to find it elsewhere than Basil Williams and Norton. And what is happening to the PNC? Do you know? People don't know. We should tell people this. Do you know the most troubled ministry on the PNC-AFC in terms of not functioning properly, and the leader of the ministry and his people pulling apart, and some of them are walking, was the AG?
Yeah.
The AG Chambers, but because of the Basil Williams personality. And Norton got the leadership of the PNC, and you've seen the hemorrhaging. And you want to know, what has he learned? I mean, Norton should have gone to say, man, drive up, break down, but should have. No, man, rest yourself, no, man, you know what you could do to me. No, I tell you, Jagan Bonham, by the Kalan, someone like Kemba Dramjatan and them would come, even Trotman would send your email and say, man, don't do that, man, let's talk. And this hemorrhage have been going on for so long now. I would think the latest is German Figaro. You think Burnham You think Ptolemy Reed, Hamilton Green, would slap down a man because Green don't believe in shaking the head of Booker's hand. And you went to shake the head of Booker's hand. And you know, I think Green could turn and say, we do that, boy. You're trying to embarrass me, over, boy. But this thing about Norton and his ego, I think it has destroyed him.
Yeah. And that is why and when sometimes my wife is not highly political, but sometimes because of me, she engaged in political discussion. But you would not see her do that in public. But in the home or in with close friends, she would. And when I said to her that Norton would not amount to anything if he assumes the leadership of the PNC, if this woman could have break up wares in the kitchen for me saying that, she would have done so. She was vehement that Aubrey Norton will lead the PNC to a recovery and all that.
Because people see him as the mad soldier in the trench.
Right, exactly. That mystique that shrouded him should not have been removed.
And
the only way to keep that intact was for him to be a powerful sidekick with some other leader. And Harmon would have provided that. Outside of that, Harmon commanded more general respect in the population than Norton. Norton comes over as a crude.
Oh, the mulatto Creole class don't want to see him.
And
he's not going to get a cent from them.
And Harmon would have commanded greater respect, even from the government, right? You know when Norton came to the power of the to the leadership of the PNC, Jack Dale said that that's a low level person. He talking up. We ain't got time with this low level individual. That was never said of Harmon, and for those reasons, I think Harmon should have continued at least for another Congress.
I think the reason is people at a very deep fighting level don't like soldiers in the trench becoming leaders of the party. Them people, I am telling you, I've seen the middle class.
But
they like you when you're fighting and you're confronting, but put the lawyer, put that professor at the head of the party.
But Norton did not do anything to belie that. He, as I said earlier, since coming to the leadership, I have not seen one innovation. I have not seen one new move, one new policy, one new countering anything in a serious way what the government is proposing. It's like if the government say, hey, we're going to give 100,000 cash grant. Norton comes up the next day, we're going to give 400. The government says we're going to build 12 new hospitals. Norton will come up and say, we're going to build 13. And you have not seen any growth in Norton. And I'll dare anybody to say they have not seen growth in Irfan Ali. We have seen it. And as I said, you can easily transfer that fatherly or
all right, as time is going, I put it between 3 and 6 seats. I would say between 3 and 5. Or 6.
Well, I would say I believe it's more 3. Around 3, yeah.
I think it may be between 3 and 6. Now, we have to bring in this because I think viewers want to know what the hell is going on with Sherrod Duncan, the bellman. Anybody get your operator got a bell? You can bring it in. What is going on with Duncan today? It's Wednesday, and if you haven't picked up the Chronicle, please pick up the Chronicle. Duncan is at war with the AFC. What's happening there? I know
Duncan's been at war with the AFC ever since he lost the leadership. The leadership. And
but he had a point, man. He used to be in that office every day. he was holding the AFC together when Nigeria resigned from politics.
There is a fundamental misunderstanding between Duncan and what the AFC founders. It's a fundamental misunderstanding.
I think he believed because he was popular, ringing the bell and using out people.
No, what Sherrod had going for him, he was beginning to be godfathered by Kemraj Ramjatan. Kemraj Ramjatan godfathered him literally into parliament and all of that. And he believed that the trajectory that Ramjatan was on would have gotten him the leadership. Now, at the time when he was godfathered into parliament, for example, Ramjatan was the leader. And I think the other leaders of the party and those who are of founder class in the party sometimes give deference to the leader, whoever is the leader at the time, if it's Raphael, if it's whoever. And I think they allowed Ramjatan to, shape things, the way he wanted to as the leader then. And I think even Ramjatan underrated the resolve of the Creole mulatto, the Afro-Creole mulatto group inside of the AFC, how strong it is, and how strong is the support base. The Ramjatan support base is very, very superficial, right? The deeper support base.
Oh yes, it's a mulatto Creole class.
Is
MCC
is with the
yeah. You see, Terrence Campbell now is being pushed.
Right, and don't underrate the strength. So when Sherrod was named versus David Patterson, because David Patterson has become very, very, very unpopular, and David Patterson, as much as he is a middle class guy, he doesn't come over as one of the MCCs. And so that superficial support that Kemraj is receiving in the party was transferred to Duncan, and Duncan was well on the way to winning. But once you throw in Nigel Hughes, that was the monkey wrench.
That was it.
And I don't think Sherrod understood what that meant in terms of an analysis of class, race, political
structure. No, he didn't have that academic reach. But you know what I think happened? I think when he announced his leadership, I think the MMC met and say, listen, Nigel, Raphael, you gotta Cathy, you gotta take this thing. I mean, Duncan, man, come on. Mm-hmm. We formed this party. This is an MMC party. You got Duncan ringing a bell.
Right.
And I think Raphael, because of his illness, say no. Cathy using that the competence to run any party. Mm-hmm. And I think they beseeched Nigel.
Yeah.
And Nigel said,
Yeah. And because Ramjatan had controlled the nomination process so that all the nominations that came in locally, for the most part, was for Duncan, urged by Ramjatan. And then the way I understand it is that the MCC made a switch.
Second election Ramjatan tried to win.
Then the MCC made a switch and say, oh, we got two overseas groups, one in the Caribbean, one in Canada, one in somewhere else.
And they nominated
Nigel at the very last moment. Before nomination closed, Nigel's name came in.
Yeah, Nigel was nominated by a Caribbean AFC group.
Right. Because throughout the nomination process, I believe, the way I understand it, Nigel was uninterested. But then, as you said, this group would have met with him and say, no, this can't
Yeah, I
happen
think
like
those
that.
who had people, those MMC people that helped form I could call some of their names, who formed the thing in 2005. I think they got alarmed.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them, of course, were not seen in the AFC. They don't be seen in the AFC.
Right.
They hang around, like the lady that they called to give the environment ministry job to, who's very close to Terence Campbell. It's those kind of people, right? They're not actively with the AFC, but they own the AFC. They own, so they
Yeah, and I don't think Duncan understood that.
No, he didn't.
And I don't think Ramjatan had an appreciation. I think he understands, but I don't think he had an appreciation for it, because obviously he had the levels of controlling that nomination process. He could have called, people and literally organized with them and so on. And I think Duncan had a shock of his life because he didn't understand how deep this MCC goes inside of the AFC. And that shock that he had of his life literally shocked him out of the AFC, because he can't fathom, thing. And this Duncan that is complaining that people are talking against him and all of that. Duncan is the chief for talking and bad-mouthing people. Don't when your own poison come back to you, and when your own fart wake you up.
Hello, be careful, Jim.
This is one of those things. It's one of those things. The word is in the English dictionary, man. Now, it's a normal word. Don't worry yourself. So the point.
The F word is in the English dictionary. Anyway, go on.
The point is that Duncan is out of his wits. I think Duncan is shallow in understanding how the AFC works. And when these things about people talking about you and people sidelining you in the AFC, it goes with an ebb and flow. And Duncan has to decide what his political future is. It's either he stays in the AFC and jostle, or he moves on. But he should be the last to talk and complain about the things he is complaining about. And so I wouldn't take what Duncan is saying very seriously. I would just put it down to ignorance about the whole political machinations of the AFC and of Guyana.
But the fact that he's saying those things in his Facebook page, I deduce from that he's not part of the war room and part of this negotiation with the PNC for this coalition thing, and like he's reeling from it. Yeah. If they had embraced him and he was there, look at the photograph show Patterson and Hughes with the other two PNC guy, Norton and Sherwood Lowe. I think they got in the war room. And I think
that is of his own doing. I think after he lost the election, he was so shell-shocked that he kept away. He stopped, from my understanding, he stopped going to the office and so on, even though Nigel offered an olive branch to him. I believe that something is afflicting Nigel that is also afflicting Norton. Their inability to tangibly. Norton had a executive committee meeting the other day that was aired, or at least on the social media, where Norton said that he's open. He wants people to come and so on, and he open for all these people who have felt that they're not part of the PNC to come back. But he is saying that just as Nigel would say, or Nigel had said about Duncan, But beyond that, this tangible reaching out, this, like as leader, coming off your high horse and just going to people and say, here, look, I am a different leader. I coming to you. I am not waiting for you to write me a letter or even send emissaries in some cases. And from my understanding, Nigel has not been doing that. Because occasionally, AFC members, some people, there are quite a few people who are still with the AFC, but they're dormant. They're not doing anything. They're not participating. They're not going around. And sometimes I meet with them and they talk to me and we talk a little about politics. And then I ask, I specifically make it my duty and I ask, man, anybody call you, invite you to become active again? And people are telling me in many regions, and then nobody in, right? And AFC has always had that outlook. For example, when Ramaya decided to leave the AFC, Ramaya telegraphed, he told them, I'm going to leave, I leave in, hoping that somebody will come to him and say, hey, let's talk, let's make an arrangement. And eventually, you're in government and you have people leaving on a daily basis. And AFC's attitude was, let her go now, let her go, right? And I see Nigel with the same outlook, that this tangible reaching out to people. I think some of the leaders in the AFC believe that you have to go to them and beg for salvation.
It's a middle class thing that is very complex to understand. I saw that in the WPA. I saw that in the AFC. You do not see that in the PNC, and you do not see that in the PPP. And I think it has to do with how the PNC second-tier leadership and the PPP second-tier leadership, how they rise and rise and rise. So by the time they reached to the top, they had no real middle-class saturation in them. Mm-hmm. But it's a middle-class thing, and one of the explanation could be they're psychologically unable to do it because they can't do it because of who they are. Mm-hmm. Whereas people like you and me and Norton and the president could go holler, man, come, let me talk. Mm-hmm. Norton is drinking Bam Bam Ali, even visit people all over the place, play domino with them. Like, when you're steeped in middle class aristocracy, it paralyzes your capacity to lose yourself among people. I've seen that with Rupert Rupnawine. Mm-hmm. Rupert Rupnawine come into this country back in 1974. And was very learned, very well spoken, but he was so steeped in middle class elitism. He didn't know how to socialize with working class people. If he come into a room and you got these 30 of WPA people playing domino or something, he will pass a hello and go up. Now, a normal PVP or PNC leader would say, how the game going there? How the game going there? I got some work for doing and come and play a game with y'all, right? He couldn't do that. He couldn't even speak clearly and say, man, what y'all doing? It just, I think the best example of that is Rupert Rupnawine. They just cannot reach out. Right.
And if go on the side of the PPP, I remember, I think it's in quarantine, they had two councillors of an NDC. At NDC level, two councillors threatened to resign, or I think they actually handed in their resignation because they weren't agreeing with the PPP leader of the area, the PPP organizer of the area. These two councillors, I can't remember which is the NDC, but I remember the incident. And they resigned. Bharat Jagdeo left Georgetown, went to the quarantine, and had a meeting with those people. And within hours, they withdraw their resignation. that would never happen in the AFC.
That would never happen in the WP.
If you express that design, you say a thing, people can just say, and that's the difference between, between the parties, and that difference will deliver results in this election more than any other.
But we can't finish this program without we talking about the MCC. We can't finish this program with one of the most malignant, despicable, degenerate expression of class elitism of what Cathy Hughes did to Williams. No. Something may be wrong. In philosophy, something may be wrong, but it's logical. People may not understand how something could be wrong, but yet be logical. You could have a middle-class person not responding to a trench cleaner, not responding to the grass carpet. But Trevor Williams had a degree from University of Guyana, worked at Digicel, and sat for 10 years in the executive with Cathy, and sat just behind her or next in Parliament. And she told that man, I can't give you a cell phone number. She just psychologically couldn't relate to a person below her class.
As you mentioned in that, let me say something quickly.
Well, did that to you, huh?
And a lot of people who don't support these names I'm about to call,
there were more.
Now, I want to mention two names quickly. Joseph Harmon, Valda Lawrence, and to a very lesser extent, because I didn't have too much interaction with her, this lady from Linden. She became a minister at some point in the government, Valerie, what's her name?
Patterson.
Yeah, Valerie Patterson.
Yeah, I
didn't have too much interaction with her, but the little interaction I had with her, I think these three people in the PNC understood politics, the politics of Guyana, and small man politics. Joseph Harmon, Valda Lawrence, and that woman. I was a senior member of the AFC and part of its executive. And I couldn't get our minister to respond to me and many things that I would probably ask on behalf of other people. I couldn't get them. Harmon never, ever not respond to a WhatsApp message if you can't get it.
Wait to say we overtime.
Right, quickly. Harmon would never, ever not respond. As busy as Harmon was, you send a message or you give him a call on behalf of somebody in one of the constituencies, Harmon will respond and attempt to assist.
We gotta go.
And so too Valda and the others. And no, let me make this point quickly. And my dealings with the PPP, I went to the vice president's office, and in the vice president's office, he has an entire staff dedicated to responding to the needs of people. He got a computer, which I would like to call a supercomputer. Everybody that has ever met him is on that computer.
He didn't come through the middle class. That class thing is very important to understand. And I keep telling people my column, I write a daily column. You cannot understand any society unless you do class analysis. Jack Doe come from ordinary, humble beginnings in Mahaika. Often I come from humble beginnings in Lenova. The class thing is important. We have to go. Our operator said we'll be 2 minutes over time. Thanks for being with us. Have a pleasant Wednesday evening. We do our call-in Friday. And then we have a very controversial guest who promised to be with us for our Monday show. Leonard, Craig, and I give our views for the past hour. We hope you digest it. You may not agree or agree, but that's our analysis. Thanks for being with us. On behalf of Leonard Craig, goodbye. Catch you later. Bye-bye.